Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and I'm excited to be back here on the Ellen Hutson blog and YouTube channel today with the September installment of Innovations with Ardith. Today I'm starting out by talking about some basic card sizes, and then I'll move on to making a simple gatefold card. In the US and Canada, we use letter size cardstock, which is 11 inches by 8.5 inches. By cutting this cardstock in half, we get two card bases for A2 size cards, which are 4.25 by 5.5 inches. It's important to note that card makers in the UK and Australia, and probably Europe as well, use A4 cardstock, and this has slightly different dimensions, so when it's cut in half, the card bases are also slightly different. Now let's talk a second about this Tim Holtz trimmer by Tonic. I love its compact size and the fact that the measurement lines are physically etched right onto the board, so you can be sure that the cardstock is exactly on the line and straight all the way down. There's a nice big plastic piece that helps protect your fingers from getting under that blade. You can cut that piece of letter-size cardstock in half in two different ways. The first results in two pieces of cardstock that are 8.5 by 5.5 inches, and by scoring these at 4.25 inch, you get a side-folding A2 card. You don't need to have a scoring tool to get good folds on your cardstock, but it does make it easier. I find it best to have the cardstock a little bit away from the top of the board. I have a hard time getting the scoring tool right into that corner, but that means you lose some of the stability that the top edge can give you. So you need to be really sure that the cardstock is right up against the edge on that left side so that your score line is perfectly straight. Use your scoring tool lightly along the line you're going to use and score it a couple of times. By doing this, you've stretched the paper fibers in that little groove, and you should fold the card away from it so that the side you scored becomes the outside of the card. Then burnish both sides, and this will help set the fold and make your card lie flat. And these steps should prevent any cracking of your cardstock. You can also cut the cardstock lengthwise, which results in two pieces of cardstock that are 4.25 by 11 inches. Scoring this at 5.5 inches gives you a top folding A2 card. The card front is the same size in both of these cards, so how you like your card folded is just a matter of personal preference. Another size card that is not really standard, but I find quite handy, is a 4.25 inch square card. I like it because I think a square card looks cool, and a square card this size fits into a standard envelope that doesn't require any extra postage, like some do. You can use it as a top fold or as a side fold. Finally, I also often make a 3.5 inch by 5 inch card. These are perfect for little thank you notes, and I guess even these could be cut down into squares for fun little tags or enclosures. Of course, you can make your cards any size you want. I usually stick with something that will fit into an envelope I have on hand. I make the card about 1/8 of an inch smaller on both sides than the outside measurements of the envelope. But you can also make your own envelopes, so the possibilities really are endless. I also wanted to talk a bit about the scoring tools. I prefer the one that came with my Score Pal. It stores right in the board and I find it fits nicely in my hand, and the tip is not too sharp, although I try not to use the very tip of it anyway. But lots of people have and love the Teflon bone folder. I have it and I use it, but just not as often as the other one. But that's the thing I find about tools. You really have to try them and use them yourself to figure out which one you prefer. For the card I'm making today, I'm going to stick with the standard A2 size card, using a half sheet of cardstock. But rather than folding it in half, I'm going to create two score lines, each one 2.1/8 inches away from the ends. This leaves the back of the card in the center, which is the standard 4.25 by 5.5 inches. As I'm folding and scoring the sides, I make sure to line up the top and bottom of the side with the back of the panel and ensure that the fold is perfectly straight before burnishing it to really set it. With a gatefold like this, you'll be able to see right away if the two sides don't meet up perfectly in the center of the front of the card. I'm going to start by decorating the front of the card a bit. I've cut a panel of Essentials by Ellen ebony cardstock down to 3.75 by 5.25 inches, and I'm going to use one of the spiderweb dies as a stencil and blend some Hero Arts unicorn white ink over it with a sponge dauber to create a kind of dusty, spooky look. When I finish the ink blending, I cut the panel in half with the trimmer, and each half will fit perfectly onto one of the sides of the gatefold, with 1/8 of an inch border all around. But before I glued them down, I got out these 3 spooky little windows from the Housebox die set. There's a ghost, a cat, and a jack-o'-lantern, and I thought it would be fun to have them. I put them where I wanted them and I ran them through my Gemini Junior. I also cut the windows out of white cardstock so that I could color them with Catherine Pooler inks in orange, green, and purple, and then inlay those portions back into the black panels. I put lots of tape runner on the white card base before laying the black panels down. This means that there's a sticky place for the inlaid bits to fit into, and they'll fit right in like puzzle pieces. Next, I cut the new Boo Ward from white cardstock, and I used the same direct-to-paper method to ink it up with Melon Ice ink. I love this yellowy green. It has the perfect spooky glow for a Halloween card. This boo is going to be the sentiment on the inside of the card, and I'm attaching it to a black speech bubble for contrast and so that it can form part of my surprise, which I'll tell you more about in a second. I used this Nuvo Smooth Precision glue pen, and the ink comes easily out through the pen tip, and it's easy to control and get it where I want it on the die cut. Now, back to that Melon Ice. After all the black on the outside of the card, I decided to go a little lighter and brighter for the inside of the card. I've taped the card down to my Waffle Flower water media mat with 1/2-inch purple tape. This tape makes it easy to create no measure borders around the 3 panels, and that will leave me with crisp white edges. I use life-changing blender brushes to apply the ink, coming in heavy on the bottom and lightening the pressure as I move toward the top, and I let it fade out to white. I won't make you watch all of it, but you know that ink blending can take some time and upper body strength, especially when you're trying to get a nice even fade. Once I was happy with the coverage of the Melon Ice, I went back in with Lime Ricky and just added a bit of depth at the very bottom of the panel. I carefully removed the purple tape by pulling it back on itself, and yes, there are those crisp white edges I was so looking forward to. That little yellow smudge in the top right corner is Copic marker soaking through from where I colored in the jack-o'-lantern's face. We'll fix that in a few minutes. Okay, so the next thing we need are some spooky cutie pies for the inside of the card. I grouped my images all in the bottom corner of the card panel, thinking that I would be able to just quickly turn the panel and get 2 impressions of everything, but I made a slight miscalculation. It's easily fixed though, and I just moved one of the ghosts, and now I'm good to go. I stamped them with Gina K Obsidian ink, which is deep black and very crisp, and it works with all coloring mediums. This set has solid pieces that can be used to quickly add color to the images, and I used the same orange and purple inks as I used on the front of the card. Doing that is called design unity. It makes sure that the front of the card and the inside of the card feel like they work together. And here's everyone all laid out, but not stuck down yet. First, I want to add a wobbler to the back of the Boo speech bubble. That way, when the recipient opens the card, there will be a little surprise action going on. I taped the 2 bats to the back of the speech bubble, and you can see how much fun they're going to be. I glued the ghosts and the pumpkins directly to the inside of the card with my tape runner. And now we're going to fix that little bit of bleed through from the Copic marker on the front of the card. I simply used some limoncello ink and the 3-star stamp from the Happy Haunting set, and I stamped them randomly along the top of the scene. Well, that first one wasn't random. It was over the bleed through, but you know what I mean. I added a little Happy Halloween sentiment from the last bite, and this inside scene is finished. Now, with all that good stuff inside, it's going to be a little harder to get this card to lay flat, so I'm going to create a belly band to help with that. I'm using this new pearlescent vellum from Lawn Fawn. Look at that shimmer. It has a bit of a greenish tinge, so even though I think it was introduced for Christmas, it's going to add a ghostly glow to this card. I cut a strip along the 11-inch side because we need the band to overlap so that we can glue it together to form an enclosure. To do some easy measuring, I laid it face down on my work surface, making sure it's straight by using the grid. Face down because only one side of it is shimmery and I want it to be on the outside of the belly band. Next, I laid the card down, making sure it was straight as well, before carefully folding each side of the vellum toward the center. This is the easiest way to make sure that the measurements are correct and that the card will fit into the band. Once I had it slightly creased, I used my score tool to press down the folds, making sure that the edges were perfectly straight. Now I need some overlap to glue it together, but there's really too much here, so I used some rough measurements to trim it down so that it ended up overlapping by about 1 inch. I used 1/2 inch Be Creative tape, which is a really strong adhesive, so that this sucker will stay together and not burst open at an inopportune moment. So normally I would suggest putting that overlap portion on the back so no one would see it, but here's an even better idea. I'm going to cover it with a die cut so that no one will see the join at all. I cut a tag from the shipping tag die set, and I did the same Melon Ice and Lime Ricky ink blending that I did on the inside of the card. Yep, design unity again. Plus, I just love that magical green glow. Next, I used my Mini Misty to do some more stamping. This time I wanted just a part of the eat at your own risk sentiment, so I did some stamp surgery and I trimmed off the eat word. You can use masking if you don't like stamp surgery. I know it's not for everyone, but I know that I can just piece the stamp back together on a block or a Misty if I want to stamp the full sentiment another time. This time the sentiment is going to say open at your own risk. I created the open letters by cutting happy, you, and friend from the block words die set. These letters are the perfect size for the tag, and I placed them down so I could get the rest of the sentiment in the correct position. I picked the stamp up with the Misty Door, inked it up with the obsidian ink, and stamped it down. Now, for the open letters. I really wasn't sure what color to make them. I was initially thinking orange or purple, which is why I cut them from white cardstock, but in the end I really felt like black was the right way to go. So I guess I just should have cut them from black cardstock, but instead I colored the white ones with a Copic marker. By the time I did both sides, no one will ever be able to tell that they weren't black to begin with. Then I used some tonic sparkle spray in Morning Fog to add some real sparkle to these letters. I spritzed them in a shoebox lid and now you can't even see them, but trust me, they're very sparkly. To finish the card, I glued 2 more ghosts to the back of the tag and I popped it up with foam tape right on that overlapping area of the belly band. I also added the goofy little spider from the spiderweb die set, and here's how it looks. The belly band is snug but not too tight. It slides off easily and there's that wobbly speech bubble on my inside seam. It's so much fun. To put the band back on, I need to curve the card a little bit to get it started, but once it's in, the band slides smoothly into place, keeping the surprise securely hidden until the recipient opens it. Now there's a lot going on in this card, but none of it's difficult, and the basic concept of a gatefold with a belly band is simplicity itself. I hope you'll give it a try. It's a really fun alternative to a standard folding card. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up below and subscribe to this channel for more inspiration. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.